Okay, it is 7 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And tonight we are talking about the seminar I went to last week. So we didn't have our class last week because I was at a seminar with Nicole Masters, and we were at Cottonwood Ranch in northern Nevada. She came and she gave a brilliant presentation for 2 days about restoring water cycles in the land and using natural methods to do that. Nicole Masters is an agricultural ecologist, and she teaches people how to grow food and food products, agronomy products, horticulture products, whatever you're growing to produce food, and using the ecology around us to be able to do that to a maximum way. Instead of fighting against nature, trying to figure out how to work with nature. That's kind of the point that she's working with, trying to take the natural world and incorporating that into agricultural systems. And she's been very successful, and she's worked around the world helping people restore ecosystems and at the same time increase their production of food or whatever agricultural product that they're creating. Maybe they're creating wool, meat, milk, vegetables, whatever it is. But I took quite a few notes, and I just wanted to share some of my takeaways to let you know what we learned, and because it was pretty brilliant. So I had never met Nicole Masters before, so I was excited to go, and I've read her book. I've watched her TED Talks. I've watched multiple videos online when she was speaking, and it was an honor to go and meet with her. It was fun because a lot of times people who are into ecology are against agriculture, and a lot of times people in agriculture are against ecology. Now I've noticed that in my experience, usually the people who are super excited about ecology, they usually are, they want to do things, and they will do things that I don't think are exactly right a lot of times. And so it was really great to be able to get to know Nicole a little bit because she did not fall into that camp. She was very down to earth. She was very straightforward. She was, excuse me, she was very clear in her, in what she was saying. And when there were things we were talking about that she didn't know the answer to, she would say, "I don't know," which was brilliant. That's a great breath of fresh air. A lot of times I've found that people will just make stuff up, or they will say things that don't have scientific data to back it up. They talk with their opinion as if it is fact, and she didn't do that. So I really appreciated that. And she talked a lot about using the entire ecosystem. So instead of just growing vegetables or fruit or grains, she talked about growing those crops and also incorporating livestock so that you had the plant element and the animal element both together. And I think that's great. I've always believed that, and I've had good success doing that. And so it was great to hear her talking about that. I thought that was really good. She did talk about restoring watersheds, and that was a big part of what we were doing at Cottonwood Ranch. They have a lot of beavers in the mountains above Cottonwood Ranch, where they bring where the irrigation water comes down to the ranch, and they used to use dynamite and blast out the beaver dams. For years they would do that, and then a while back, about maybe 25-30 years ago, they stopped doing that because they learned that the beaver would actually give them more water if they could hold the water in place up at the higher elevations. Then the water table would rise there would be more water overall. And they've been doing this for a long time, several decades. And it is true, they have more irrigation water now than they had when they were in the, before. And so that's pretty great. So we saw several parts of the ranch. We saw where there were used to be sagebrush everywhere, and now grassy meadows are growing, and the sagebrush is dying out and the grass is taking over because the water table is rising due to the fact that they're allowing the beaver to live and to thrive, which is pretty great. It really is pretty good. When you think about this, it really seems like it's easier. It's certainly different, but it is easier to work with nature instead of fighting against it. So that was pretty great. I really enjoyed her perspective. I enjoyed her honesty, and one of the great things that she talked about was the fact that you can take your mineral for the cattle, and you can put different kinds of seeds in that mineral, and then the cattle can just spread the seeds for you, because that's a lot of the animals will do that. When you just watch nature and you look at nature, you see that animals are spreading seeds all the time. So it was pretty wonderful to see this actually happening, to see this in practice, where people would have their mineral with just normal cattle mineral, just your regular mineral that you would purchase, and then they would be putting mixing different kinds of seeds inside there, legumes, forbs, grasses, just different types of seeds. But they would choose the variety of seed that goes into the mineral according to the ecosystem that they're trying to change. So if they were in a place where they needed more, a certain, let's say that the soil was super compacted, they would take the early succession plants that have a big taproot, and they would put those types of seeds in that mineral, because those are the seeds that are going to sprout and grow in compacted soils. And so they were using the species appropriate, how do you say that? They were using the appropriate species for the climate and the conditions for what they needed in different parts of the world. And she was talking about a lot of different places that are able to do this. So plants like chicory, we think of that as a weed, but it has a taproot that will go way down in. It'll break up hard pans, and you can put it in the mineral. The cattle will eat it. And then as the cattle wander around the acres, wherever they are, whether it's rangeland or a pasture or whatever, then when their manure hits the ground, those seeds will sprout and begin to grow. So using cattle as a tool to plant seeds is actually very, very effective. But it's different. It's a different way of thinking. Farmers and ranchers, we think of planting seeds with a machine. We don't think of using the ecology the way it was created to do that. But those who are doing it are having success. And so that's an important thing to think about, that we can use these animals to do a lot of the work for us. Excuse me for this cough I've got. Okay. Several other plants that you could use to put in mineral. She mentioned chicory, Verseem clover, and all different kinds of forbs and legumes. A forb is a flowering plant. So whatever kind of seeds you can get your hands on, you can plant. And there are some weeds that are noxious. They're probably on lists that are like it's illegal to plant them, but they're good plants that will actually help to change the ecology. So I'm not telling you to break the law and plant plants if they're on a list. So you better check your list and figure it out. But a lot of times there are certain plants that can really help the ecosystem to change from an early succession to a mid succession. And if we use ecological tools to do that, it can do it faster than if we are just out there trying to, you know, like we're plowing it up, we're out there planting and fertilizing, we're doing all these things that normal modern agriculture does. Sometimes we are not as effective as using the tools that are just out there that we don't even think of as tools. So what do I mean by tools? Well, cattle would be a tool. A lot of times when the seeds go through the digestive system of a cow, it scarifies the seed, it wakes it up. And so when the cow leaves and moves on, it leaves all those cow pies out there, and those plants will begin to grow out of the cow pies. There's a lot of researchers worldwide who have pictures of nothing growing, just bare sand, except for where the cow pies are, and the plants are growing up out of the cow pies. So it's pretty neat to be able to change the desert into a productive system by using animals to be able to do that. So she talked quite a bit about the soil food web, the little guys, the microbes in the soil. She talked a lot about fungus, and she talked a lot about the importance of vermicompost, which means worm castings. And the worm castings are really important. They're very like they're a stimulator. They wake things up. A lot of times you can have land. Let's just, for example, just think of the deserts in North America. They shouldn't even be deserts. They should be grasslands, but they are turning into deserts and they're getting bigger. So let's just take the Great Basin Desert for a minute, because that's where I live, in Nevada and Utah, part of Idaho, down into Arizona, the Great Basin Desert, pretty big area. Part of Oregon is part of that. And most of those soils are what we call sleepy soils. There's a lot of fungus in those soils. There are a lot of bacteria. There are other microorganisms in those soils, but they are not active. They are not working. And so why would the organisms be there? Because it used to be a grassland. And so the spores and the cysts, which are the dormant stages of those microbes, are in those soils. So when you're driving up the highway and you can see vast acres of the great big Wyoming sagebrush, you are looking at sleepy soils most of the time. So if we can get the right condition, the sagebrush will die out and the grasslands will return. And the best way to do that is to spray on that land an extract of worm tea, like a vermicompost extract or a tea. And extracts and teas are a little bit different in the way that you make them. But if you take that, you mix it up, you put it out there, and a lot of times it will wake up the fungus. And when that happens, then the latent seed bank, because there's lots of seeds everywhere, they will sprout and begin to grow. Now, if there's no water, they won't sprout and grow. But when it does rain, they can often take off and grow. So timing is important, that we need rain. That's the main thing. But if you don't stimulate and wake up the sleepy cysts and spores in the soil, then the seeds that are in the ground normally don't grow. So a lot of times we're out there as farmers, as agriculturists, as ranchers, we go out and we plant thousands and thousands of dollars worth of seed, and it does rain and nothing comes up. And then we scratch our heads and think, man, that was expensive. I wish it would have come up. I wonder why it didn't come up. It should have come up. We had a lot of rain. We had good snow. And some years it comes up, some years it doesn't. And when it doesn't come up, it's because sometimes the conditions are not right in the soil to germinate those seeds, because germination oftentimes takes more than just moisture and warmth. A lot of times it takes the presence of living, active microbes in the soil to wake it up. Not always, but sometimes. And we have found through research that a lot of times if we get that worm extract and we coat our seeds with it like an inoculant on the seed, then the seeds go ahead and grow, and they do really well. So that is kind of an overview of some of the highlights that we talked about at Nicole Masters' class last week. And so that was super fun. She did talk a lot about a lot of the deficiencies that are in our soils and in people and in animals. There's a lot of zinc deficiency, a lot of boron deficiency, and way too much phosphorus. So phosphorus toxicities. It's interesting because when we add phosphorus to the soil, it makes things grow big. So the United States Department of Agriculture normally has told people for decades and decades, 100 years almost, to add phosphorus to the soil because you will get more money for your crop, because you will have bigger, better crops, because phosphorus helps in the cell division. And so your cells will be dividing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it has been an American tradition to add lots of phosphorus to the soil. But that is a bad thing because most soils are not deficient in phosphorus. And if you pull a soil sample, a lot of times the fertilizer companies will say, yeah, it needs phosphorus, and it will actually ask for phosphorus. But if you put the phosphorus on, it's bad because it stops the growth of the natural microbes that make the phosphorus that is there available. So that's a problem. And then there are some researchers that have linked high phosphorus levels in food to cancer. And that kind of makes sense because phosphorus is all about cell division, and cancerous things in bodies are all about cell division. So that's kind of interesting when you think about that. Now, natural phosphorus is already in the soils, so all we need are the microbes to wake that up. And so that's not a bad thing at all. But the artificial man-made phosphorus that we put on is something that we want to steer away from, because that makes it so that a lot of the other things that we need, like boron and zinc, are not as available in the foods that we're eating. So, and a lot of these things are questions more than answers at this point, which is pretty fun. It's pretty awesome. Once we do get the grass growing, and grass is starting to come up in, and it could be a grass or a forb or a legume, any kind of a plant. Once they're growing, where it used to be just bare dirt and now we have a plant that's growing, if we flash graze those areas, meaning the cattle come in, but they don't stay, so they're there for 5 minutes and then they move on, so they're just walking through, that helps the plants to tiller. And tiller means that they branch out. So if you have small plants that are coming up, you could flash graze it and then give them maybe a year of rest before a grazing animal comes back again. And those plants, instead of having one shoot coming up per plant, when you flash graze it, it branches out and a whole bunch of shoots come out. That makes the plants bigger, thicker. But here again, using the grazing animals as an ecological tool to stop desertification and to grow more food. So think about that in our own yards, in our own gardens. If we're not on a bigger piece of land, how is this effective? Because all of these things that I talk about are principle based. So if you're in a small greenhouse, is any of this even relevant? Yes, it absolutely is. What if you're on 20,000 acre cattle ranch? Is this relevant? Yes, it certainly is. All of these things are relevant for sure. I think that how would flash grazing be relevant if you're growing basil? Well, when you cut the basil off, it tillers and it gets thicker and bigger, and most plants are that way. So that's pretty great. Boron deficiency is something that she mentioned that is a big problem. And boron moves the sugars. So if you have a Brix meter, like a refractometer, and you are looking at the sugar levels in your plants, she pointed something out that was really interesting and good. I didn't even know this. I've been using Brix measurements for a long time, but I learned something new about that, which is great. That's why we always have to do continued education. But she said if you're taking Brix readings throughout the day, on one day on the same plant, and so you would do it maybe 4, 5, 6 times during the day as it's getting light, and then 10 in the morning, and then at noon, and then 3, and then later, then what you should see, because at the different time of day, the plant will be photosynthesizing at a different rate depending on the how intense the sunlight is. And so that makes sense. I get that. But what she pointed out that was brilliant is that if you get the same reading all day long in those different levels of light, then that is an indicator that you may have a boron deficiency in your plants, because boron is responsible for moving sugars. So it makes complete sense. And there's a lot of boron deficiencies out there. So anyway, those are some of the highlights that she talked about. Here again, it was a 2-day seminar, so I can't tell you everything in 20 minutes that she said, but those were some of the super fun things. But mainly, I was super interested and fascinated and happy that she was speaking from a foundation of science where we actually know what she, the things she was saying were true, and it wasn't just opinion. Everybody can have an opinion, and that's fine. Everybody should have an opinion. But when we teach opinions as if they're fact, or to promote some kind of an agenda other than trying to come to the truth, then that causes problems in our society. So the number one thing that I want to do when now that I'm home is I want to do about 100 test plots on our ranch here. Just go out there with a bunch of vermicompost and make up an extract and just pour it out in a whole bunch of places. I'll probably take a GPS and just put pins on so I know where I did it, and just do like a 4-foot by 4-foot square and see if we can wake up some of these sleepy soils. So the only thing I'm going to do is put that vermicast out there and see what happens. So I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be something that will be worthy to take, just to take note of. It's something to observe and see what happens within the next year. And if we do get plants growing that weren't growing there before, then we can you know, put out a lot more in those areas. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up this to questions. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and type those in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask me the question. And you can ask questions about anything. I probably won't know the answer unless it's about gardening. So you can type in the chat, you can unmute and ask questions, and we can have a Q&A here. I had a question from a friend a few days ago, and here again, they were saying that the tomatoes are starting to ripen, and they were having blossom end rot, but they didn't know what it was. And I get this every single year. People say, the bottom of my tomatoes are turning black. What do I do? And they don't taste good. I cut the black part off, but they didn't even ripen good. They were red, but they were yucky. That is blossom end rot. That is calcium deficiency. The easiest thing to do is to save your eggshells throughout the year, crush them up, put about a tablespoon of them in the bottom of your transplanting hole. That normally takes care of it. Okay. Parker says, sorry, we were late. We missed hearing where you went to the 2-day conference and who was speaking. We went to Cottonwood Ranch. It's about 2 hours north of where I live in northern Nevada. And it was Nicole Masters. She's an ecological agriculturist or an agricultural ecologist. I guess that's the same thing. But she was pretty brilliant. And so I was gone up there last week, and that's why I wasn't on last Thursday night. So that was it was really good. She's been doing consulting for 20 years on farms and ranches all over the world. So it was fun to talk to her and ask her all the questions I could think of. She had a good presentation. We put a brand new roof on the Wallapini greenhouse this week. And so we ordered Solex, that is SOLEXX, and we put it on there. And so now our greenhouse roof should last for at least 25 years. Solex is a new, it's like a brand new company, about 25 years old. And the greenhouses that they built 25 years ago when they first invented this product look like they're brand new still. And I've never heard anybody who bought Solex who was unhappy with it. So I'm excited about it. So nobody knows how long it will last. But what we do know is it's a lot cheaper than other rigid coverings. There are coverings like plexiglass and all those hard things, you know, and those ones are fine. They don't blow away in the wind, but they're very expensive and they yellow over time. Some of those that are the most expensive will begin to stop the sunlight coming through in about 10 to 12 years. And so your plant growth stops growing. So they have to be replaced because of that. And when you look through the glass, it looks the same to the human eye, but it starts cutting out certain rays from the sun. So that's a problem. So that's pretty fun stuff. So there's a plant called chicory. It's a pretty awesome plant. And if you've read Jubal Sackett, that's what he would dig up and make a drink out of the roots. But chicory is something that we can grow in our gardens to help break up the hard pans, and then you can eat the roots. You can make a cocoa or coffee type drink out of the roots, and it's nutritious and it's very good. The Solex is a hard material. So it's weird to explain that, but it comes in a roll and you unroll it, but it's a hard, rigid plastic. So the roll is like big, it's like really big. But it doesn't flap in the wind because it's hard, it's rigid. And it has double wall. And so it has some insulation in it as well. It diffuses the light so that when the sun comes through it, the light is diffused. Now, there is some research being done on plants that are grown in greenhouses versus plants that are grown outside. And some people are saying that the plants grown under greenhouse coverings don't have the same nutrition, but nobody knows that for sure yet. But it's interesting that research is being done. So over the years, hopefully better and newer and more wonderful things will be invented that can mimic the sunlight. What I have found is that plants generally grow better and they are healthier in a greenhouse than if they are outside. I think sometimes we get too much ultraviolet lights in the outside crops. There's one crop for sure that always does better in the greenhouse, and that is garlic. For some reason, I always get bigger bulbs in the greenhouse than outside. And I think everywhere I've ever lived, which is a lot of places, I've grown garlic in greenhouses and outside in the garden. And they're always bigger and better in the greenhouse, which is pretty awesome, to be able to have bigger, better, more wonderful things. To me, I think that taste equals nutrition. I think that taste and nutrition they're synonyms. And some of the most flavorful foods that I've ever grown have been in a greenhouse. So this research happening saying that plants are more nutritious outside, I don't know what that means because they weren't clear in the study that what they published. It was just like that. They just said it's more nutritious. That doesn't mean anything. You have to actually tell me a list of proteins and vitamins and what are the metabolites that are happening in those plants. What are the differences? How did you set up your side-by-side trials? But I don't know. It sounded more like propaganda than an actual study. But I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying if you're going to do science, then actually use the scientific method instead of just making, just statements. Any 10-year-old can make a statement. Okay. Do we have any more questions from anybody that's on tonight? If you're on here live tonight and you want to ask a question, go ahead and ask. Type it in the chat. If there are no other questions, we're going to wrap this up. And next week, we will come back. I'll be back on here and we will be talking more about management. We've been going through management principles. Next week, we will be back on our management principles. But I did just want to go through with some of the highlights of what Nicole talked about. There's Kaylee's got her hand, yeah. Let me see if I can. Oh, Kaylee, talk to me. I don't know what button to push. I see your hand.
I don't know what button to push either. My daughter helped me raise my hand, but I ran out to my hoop house and grabbed a funny tomato that I noticed today. I was going to ask you if you had any ideas what was going on. Got it?
All right, let's see it.
Oh, see how it's got those funny bumps?
Yeah, almost like a white blister thing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Any ideas?
Nope, I've never seen that in my life.
I haven't either.
I don't know.
Okay.
Is it just that one or is there a whole bunch of them that were that way?
Oh, I didn't inspect them all, but this is the one that I saw, but there were other ones on the plant that did not have this going on. It almost looks like
sometimes it might just be a genetic thing where that particular fruit did something weird. Sometimes weird things can happen to fruits during pollination. I don't know if you've ever seen apples that have stripes on them, like a variety that's not supposed to, and then you'll get stripes. That's because it didn't get fully pollinated. So sometimes funny looking fruits can just be a genetic thing, and there's no disease involved. So
okay, well, hopeful.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we will see you back here next week. I'm going to go ahead and shut this down for the night. And hopefully this is helping you have the best garden of your entire life.